Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I am back with part 2 of my 10 cards 1 kit using the Simon Says Stamp October 2019 card kit. If you missed the first 5 cards, make sure you check out the video that I posted yesterday. So I am jumping here into card number 6. I have taken this beautiful pattern paper and trimmed this down to 4x5 1/4. I then used some ATG to attach that to the top of one of the light gray card bases. I've also trimmed out from a piece of vellum another panel that measures 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I know that's a little difficult to see here, but I do have that placed on top of the card base here. And I'm going to do a little bit of heat embossing on that. So I've grabbed my anti-static powder tool and then I've lined up this sentiment, "You couldn't be more awesome." I'm going to stamp that out with my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Being really careful, I juiced that up really well because this vellum, I was afraid it was going to move on me. So I wanted to make sure that if at all possible, I could get this in one pass, and there it turned out pretty good. So I'm going to add some Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail Clear Embossing Powder over top of that. That way the black is going to come through. And I've left in how I use my heat gun on the vellum. You have to be really careful. If you get too close, you can actually burn vellum and it will turn sort of a brownish color. So what I'm doing here is hitting it from the front and the back to try and get my paper or my vellum heated up. And I'm just going in really short bursts, placing a little heat, moving it away, a little more heat, moving it away, until I finally get all of those little granules melted and smooth. I'm going to go ahead while I have my MISTI out and stamp my inside panel. This is a Nina Solar White, trimmed to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I've stamped out the sentiment, "I am stronger with your support, thank you." And then I have an extra piece left over from that pattern paper on the front there. This measures probably about 1/2 inch or just shy of 1/2 inch. I've added some ATG behind that, and I'm going to place that along the bottom panel here. So I will go ahead, add some ATG to the back, and place that on the inside of my card base. And then for the front here, I'm going to add little glue dots all behind that sentiment. This is going to keep this nice and tight down on top of my card base. Now, because this is vellum and it's light and I've added heat to it, there is a little bit of warping. So I'll show you how I fix that in a second here. First, I'm going to press this into place, just making sure that I don't have any glue that's going to peek out behind those letters there. Then you'll see that my edges kind of curl up a little bit. So I have pulled in some stickers. These are from the Maggie Holmes Heritage Collection. It's a really pretty sort of coppery gold, it's almost a rose gold color. And they are some picture corners. So I'm going to grab 2 of those, add one at either end of the opposite corners from where I have that sentiment. And that's going to help keep my panel in place. And that will complete card number 6. So here for card number 7, I've taken this family tree pattern paper and I've trimmed that down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, just making sure I kept that tree centered. And I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "You're amazing." Now, I did forget to hit this with my anti-static powder tool. Luckily, this was one that I wanted to emboss with some clear embossing powder, so even if I had any extra granules that were stuck, you really aren't going to see them. But I really meant to hit it with that. I just forgot as I was in the process of making it. I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with some Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail Clear Embossing Powder. And then I wanted to add a little bit more color. So I have grabbed one of my Copic markers and I am just going to go in and touch the tip to each of these tiny little leaves and add some green. Once that's done, I wanted to add a little texture. If you watched my Spellbinders 10 cards one kit that I just did, I have pulled in some tissue paper and added sort of some texture along the edge of a card, and I wanted to play around with that a little bit more here. So I have added some ATG along one side, and then I'm going to line up my ruler here and just carefully pull this down so that I get just sort of a little bit of a torn, rough edge, and I'm going to just let that flutter around all four sides. So I think I show you twice how I do this. Oh yeah, so I'm going to get rid of the excess here, and then that tore really nicely, so I already had the torn edge. I'm going to take my base, add a little bit more ATG there, and then I can go ahead and place this down and I don't have to worry about tearing off another edge. I did then go ahead and add a line of this across the top and the bottom of this panel as well. And then I added some Scor-Tape behind this for a little dimension. I am only placing that on the paper, not behind the tissue. That way that can sort of flutter and give a little bit of a ruffle to the front of the card base. And this card base is made from Paper Tray Ink Ocean Tides cardstock. Here for the inside, I've got a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4. I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "Thank you for loving me when I needed it most." And then I have grabbed some more of this script pattern paper. This was really pretty. It was one of my favorites. And it talks about like branches on a tree, we grow in different directions. And so I just sort of strategically placed that there. So I did get that "we grow in different directions" line along the bottom. I've added some ATG to the back. I'll place my panel on the inside, and that will complete card number 7. So here for card number 8, I'm going to layer a few pattern papers. I have trimmed this black background to 4 by 5 1/4. And then I had a leftover strip of this really pretty white floral pattern paper. This measures probably about 1.5 inches. Added some ATG and placed that along the side here. I'm going to do some more heat embossing. I'm going to add a little bit of my powder tool off to the side here. And then I wanted something that would stand out against this black background. So I have pulled in some Lawn Fawn Rose Gold embossing powder. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this with my Versamark ink. And then I'll add my powder, and you'll see when I heat set this that it is just a really beautiful pinkish color, and it has sort of a glow and iridescence to it. It matches the very light hints of pink in those flowers on that stripe of paper going up and down there. So I did go ahead and add some foam tape to the back of that, place that on top of one of the light gray card bases. For the inside, I have stamped out the sentiment, "I can't thank you enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you." And I've grabbed a piece of that rose gold Tim Holtz paper that was included in the kit, added some ATG to the back of that, and I'll place that along the panel. Add some ATG to the back of that, and then add my panel to the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 8. So card number 9 here is my favorite of the bunch. I have about a 1-inch strip of this script pattern paper, and I'm again going to do some heat embossing. So I've grabbed my Versamark ink. I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "Thank you," and then I will again heat emboss that using that same Lawn Fawn Rose Gold powder. I am going to again add some of this tissue paper, this time just along the top and bottom of this strip. I think this gives a really pretty texture, and it worked really well with the sort of layers that are in these petals of the flowers. I fell in love with this floral pattern paper. I as you can tell, because I've used it on 3 different cards, I just thought this was so beautiful. So again, I'm just going to tear that to get my little strip on either end here. And then I'm working on a card base made from MFT Grapesicle. There's a really light sort of pinky purple color in the petals of the flowers, and this worked really well with that. I've trimmed the pattern paper to 4 by 5 1/4. add some ATG, and I'll place that down there. And then again, I'm going to add some foam tape just behind the paper, pattern paper portion of this strip here. I'm going to let those torn edges sort of crinkle and add a little bit of texture to the front of the card. I'll go ahead and place this down here and then trim away the excess. For the inside, I've got a Nina panel, again trimmed to 4x5 1/4. I'm going to stamp out this longer, smaller sentiment. It reads, "You help me be a better version of myself. I'm so grateful for your friendship, advice, and unconditional love." Along the bottom, I've added some ATG, and I'm going to place down the remainder of this paper. I think I ended up doing about just shy of 1.5 inches, closer to 1.25 inches. I'll trim off that excess, and then I've got a strip of some jelly bean green to pull in a little bit of the green from the leaves in that pattern paper. Added that along the bottom, added some ATG to the back, and I'll place this on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 9. For card number 10, I decided I was going to use that little envelope that was included. One of the smaller sentiments reads just a small note of thanks, and I thought it would be cute to create a small thank you note. So I have trimmed down, and let me get you the dimensions on this. So I've trimmed down some of that rose gold pattern paper, and that measures 2.5 by 3.5. And then I have pulled in some MFT whipped cream cardstock to stamp on. That measures 2.25 by 3.25. So I just have a little bit of that rose gold edge peeking out there. I stamped out the sentiment "thank you" with my Simon Says Stamp black ink. And then on top of my envelope flap, I stamped out just a small note of thanks. That's gonna fit in there perfectly. I'm gonna layer or add a few layers to the top of my card base. So again, I've got that rose gold paper, and I've trimmed that to 4x5 1/4. I've got that script gray sentiment paper, and I'm gonna add some ATG there. This is trimmed down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Go ahead and place that on top as well. And then I'll add some ATG to the back of my envelope, and I'm going to place that on top of everything, just adding a little bit of an angle to that. I wanted to be able to keep this flap closed, so I pulled in one of my removable glue dots and just put like a half of one on the very corner of that envelope. That way it'll stay closed, but you can easily get it back open to get the note out. For the inside, I'm on a Nina panel trimmed to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I stamped out the sentiment "thank you for everything." And then I decided to add one more thing to the front. I'm gonna stamp this little heart right in the corner of that envelope flap. Trimmed off a piece of that rose gold mirror paper. I'm gonna place that right along the bottom edge of this panel. Trim away the excess, add some ATG to the back, and I'll place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 10. Here are a few close-ups of the finished cards. In the description box below, you'll find my blog post, which has additional photos and links to the supplies I used. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.